Sometimes the richest country in the world goes bankrupt, not because it runs out of money, but because it becomes dependent on those who manage that money. And if that sounds strange, wait.
16th century Spain, the reign of Philip II, the most powerful empire in Europe, a vast dominion stretching from the Americas to Asia. Silver from Potosi, the largest deposit in the world, flows into Seville in volumes Europe has never seen before. It seems like more than wealth. It feels like absolute advantage. But this is exactly where the paradox begins, the one that will later undermine the entire system. A country that controls money gradually loses control over how that money works. And it doesn't happen suddenly. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. If you asked anyone at the time, they would say Spain is unstoppable. It has everything: army, resources, influence, gold, silver. But it also has something else: constant expenses. Philip II is not just ruling, he is fighting, almost constantly. The Netherlands, France, the Ottoman Empire, massive armies, fleets, garrisons across Europe. These are not short campaigns. This is a system that requires money every single day. And here comes the first crack. Silver from the New World is not instant money. It has to be mined, processed, shipped across the ocean, protected from pirates. This takes months, sometimes years. But soldiers need to be paid now. So a solution appears, one that seems perfect. Borrow. The Spanish crown begins actively taking loans from European bankers, primarily from Genoese financiers and also from German houses like the Fuggers. The logic is simple. The king gets money now and promises to repay it when the silver arrives. It sounds like a smart financial strategy, and at first it works perfectly. Money comes in on time, the army is funded, wars continue, the empire expands. Everything looks like growth. But there's one detail almost no one notices at the time. Every loan is not just support, it is an obligation. Every credit is a piece of the future already spent. And as long as the silver keeps flowing, it doesn't feel like a problem. But the system is already changing. Spain is no longer just a country that spends money. It is becoming a country that owes money. And here comes the second layer of dependence: financial dependence. By the mid-16th century, Spain can no longer simply stop. It cannot suddenly reduce its army. It cannot end its wars. It cannot walk away from its obligations, because behind every decision, there is debt. And at some point, those debts begin to grow faster than real money arrives. Then comes 1557, the first major bankruptcy. Philip II declares that Spain cannot meet its obligations in full. Formally, it is called a restructuring, negotiations, a temporary measure. But for bankers, it is a signal that the rules can change. Until that moment, Spanish credit was considered reliable. Now, it isn't. And this is where something deeper begins. Trust starts to disappear. At first, it's almost invisible. Slightly higher interest rates, slightly stricter conditions, a little more hesitation. But for a system built on credit, even small changes are enough to create pressure. Because money becomes more expensive and obligations do not go away. Spain continues to borrow because it has no choice. Wars continue, costs rise, pressure builds. And here comes a paradox that is rarely stated clearly. The more Spain borrows, the weaker it becomes, not because it has fewer resources, but because it has less freedom. Every decision now depends on how creditors will react. Can it start a new campaign? Only if it can finance it. Can it hold a territory? Only if it can pay for it. Can it reform the system? Only if it doesn't scare lenders.
The empire is no longer acting on its own logic. It is acting on the logic of debt. Then, in 1575, comes the second bankruptcy. Now it is no longer an exception, it is a pattern. Spain again fails to meet its obligations. Again negotiations, again restructuring, and again trust takes a hit. By this point, bankers understand something important. Spain is no longer a safe borrower, it is a risk, and risk has a price. Interest rates rise, conditions become harsher, access to capital becomes more difficult, and this is where the system enters a phase that is almost impossible to escape. Because the more expensive the loans, the more you need to borrow to service them, and the more you borrow, the higher the risk becomes, a closed loop. At the same time, something else happens. Silver, the very source of Spain's power, begins to work against it. There is too much of it. It floods Europe, fuels inflation, pushes prices up. The real value of money declines. Spain becomes wealthy on paper, but its real expenses keep rising. And this is where the story shifts to a deeper level. This is no longer just about debt. This is about structural imbalance, a situation where the very resource that creates power also destabilizes it. Spain finds itself in a position where it has everything except stability. And in 1596, the third bankruptcy happens. This time, the consequences are even more severe. Creditors are exhausted. Trust is nearly gone. Financial flexibility shrinks. The empire begins to lose ground. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Fewer options, less control, less room to maneuver. And this is where the core of the story reveals itself. If you look at it simply, you might say Spain went bankrupt because it spent too much, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is deeper. Spain built a system that trapped itself, a system where money arrives with delay, expenses are constant, credit fills the gap, trust holds everything together. And once one element weakens, the entire system starts to break. Bankers were not villains. They did not destroy the empire. They simply reacted to risk. The real problem was that the system became dependent on trust, and trust is not a resource. It is a perception. You cannot mine it. You cannot ship it across the ocean. You cannot print it. You can only maintain it. And Spain gradually lost it, not in one moment, but through a series of reasonable decisions, each one logical, each one relieving pressure temporarily, and each one making the system weaker. And that is the central paradox. The empire was not destroyed by a mistake. It was destroyed by logic. The logic of short-term solutions inside a system that required long-term stability. A logic where money became a tool of power, and then quietly became its limit. And when that balance finally shifted, it became clear that the greatest weakness of the richest empire in the world was not its army, not its territory, not its resources, but trust. And once that disappears, everything else begins to lose meaning. Because you can control silver, you can control armies, you can control land, but you cannot control whether people believe you. And sometimes that is enough.